What's up, guys? It is Bean here from Bean of Games. Today we're going to do a meta tier list on the new set post Phantom Nightmare. We got a couple regionals coming up, a couple bigger events, some YCSs. So let's get into it. But right before, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and we will be raffling off this wonderful V8 Spellground You're the Rabbit. It's not the best Spellground, but it's a Spellground. Please go back to the V3 fabrics. Anyways, that's none of my business. Let's get right into this tier list here. First thing we got, Flu Wonderies. Okay, so where do I put this? I'm gonna say, like, take a very bold assumption and say that it's 1.5. So main things here is it can play Shifter. Shifter's gonna be very toxic like usual, and a lot of decks like Fire King are mostly Link, so they have to summon attack position, and Pen negates attack position monsters. This deck just doesn't lose resources. This deck just goes and goes, and like I said, Shifter hard carries. Like, look at that little man right there. He hard is being carried by Shifter. But overall, it's good into Voiceless Voice also, because their Skull Guardian has to summon an attack. And overall it does have some consistency issues. Droll is going to be in format, so that is going to hurt it. So maybe it drops down to tier 2 a little bit, but I'm just going to put it in 1.5 because I feel like people are not going to be prepared for this deck overall. So let's move on. We have Goblin Riders, or Goblins in a sense. Tier 2. It's definitely part of the lore. It's going to get more support at some point, more than likely, if Konami says, hey, I like you as a deck. But, we'll see. It could be terrible support. As right now, there's not a lot of XYZs running around. That being said, you kind of got to detach from your guys. Some have effects. A main one is that it can get hurt by a Droll, a well-timed Droll. Ashking the Tour Guide is pretty decent. And Nib. It really hits hard into Nib. I guess we'll give a little insight to this deck. Once they hit like 5 or 6 summons, they're going to have 2 level 3s. That's where you Nib, because then they can throw up, I forget what card it is. It's a rank 3 that both players draw a card and it's an effect. So yeah, definitely Nib there. But as for that, it's tier 2 right now. This is the bane of Pearly's existence right here. So if we ever go into a heavy Pearly format again, this deck's really going to shine. Next deck, Branded. Where do we put Branded? Definitely 1.5. We'll put it here right in front of Floowandereeze. So Branded's really good for, well, everybody who bought the structure deck and says, I won't let this deck die. And congratulations, you're part of that wonderful group of people who just say, hey, let's keep pushing on forward with this deck. I'm just kidding. But Ash is being removed from a lot of decks. A lot of people are siding out Ash. Well, you won't side out going against this, but you know what I mean. People are taking Ash out of their main deck, so this won't suffer from the being targeted because everyone's playing Branded like it was back in the day. People really aren't siding D-Barrier as much. This deck can play. This deck has an amazing Voiceless Voice matchup, and Voiceless Voice just struggles, and you're going to see a lot of Voiceless Voice running around. You're going to see a lot of Fire King running around. I think we are going into a hand trap heavy format right now. So with that being said, unless it's Ash, this deck kind of just plays, and it gets a lot of resource. And if you're good on the deck, if you're nice on this deck, I'm talking like you just went out, bought a brand new diamond ring for the girlfriend I know nobody has, and it's that nice of a ring, and she turned you down. 1.5, definitely going to have a decent matchup in some of the meta. Chimera. Illusion, Chimera. I'd say let's put this right here, tier 2. So, this suffers kind of like a Branded thing, except for everybody in the meta is going to be playing some hand traps. Droll's going to be pretty heavy. Droll hurts this deck. This deck can play like Crossout and stuff, and I've seen a lot of lists like that going around, but overall, Ash will still a little bit be in format. Droll will be. People are going to be siding or maining Bells, Shifters. I mean, a lot of hate is coming this format, and unfortunately this deck kind of gets indirectly hit. So that's why I think it's tier 2. Let's go to Centurion. Let's see, where do we want to put? Probably tier 2. So the horse cards, they're amazing. I don't even know the last time I've truly like sat down and was like, let me read all the horse cards. I just see the hit board and then I have to pick them up and be like, oh, that's right, this guy's really good. If I attack over this, I just kind of lose. So just the pure horse cards themselves, I get teched into this deck. They got Bonfire to search one of, I think it's Primera? Or no, Trudea. So that's always good. It can fall into Droll a little bit more heavier there, but plays it under Nib. It can Calamities lock, but you have to be careful because there's turn player priority. Calamities does miss timing, but there's going to be some super polys running around, which kind of says, hey, that sucks for your Legacia and Primera. And Cosmic. A lot of Fire King players are going to be siding Cosmic because, well, anti-spell kind of goes really hard against Fire King. So speaking of which, that's our next deck, the little Birdman right here. We're going to bring him all the way up to tier 1. This deck, it's good. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's good. I honestly think this is the best deck moving forward in the room. It could suffer from what like Branded did back in the day, or Labyrinth does, is a lot of people are going to be playing a lot of hate. This deck loses really heavy to Droll. It can still play around it sometimes, don't get me wrong, but the main combo, you get Droll, it sucks. Maybe players will start to counterside, putting crossouts and call buys into the deck, but it still puts up a board that doesn't look menacing at first. It's, you know, Amble Whale with a whole bunch of stuff in your grave. You got your princesses, you got your Garunix, Kirin in hand, you sum out SP on your opponent's turn. It's just a lot of 1-for-1 destruction, and it's very hard to get around. People are probably going to side in like Evenleys, Cosmics against this deck. Soul Release is another big one against this deck. But if they're on the goo, which I'm not going to release the goo, you can, if you see me, talk to me, I'll release the goo, but this deck's going to side a certain counter side card for a lot of those cards, and then just, you know, that's a wrap. Especially, I think the first event coming up is West Virginia. There's regionals out there in West Virginia, so, you know, I'll definitely be there. Come say hi to me if you see me, and then we can go from there. But definitely tier 1. Going on to Exo. Oh boy. You're better off going on your buy sell trade sites on Facebook, searching a Yugi starter deck from 2002, at least buying the Dark Edition. This deck, so maybe tier 2, but even then, no, I don't see it. I think Shifter hard carries this deck also because it can play Shifter. I think there's going to be some nibs running around. Droll is going to kind of hurt this deck unless you saw all your combo pieces your first hand. But even then, it just doesn't feel good playing this deck moving forward right now. This is also a deck that's kind of like reliant heavily on graveyard. Like in tier format, it was great to play this because tier didn't have a lot of like non-engine slots for hand traps. So this deck could just play on, not worry about nib, drop Shifter all day and do its job. But we're going to have a lot of decks in the format. We're going to have a lot of hand traps in the format. Unfortunately, it gets indirectly super hit, just kind of like Chimera here. Like I said, just go buy that Yugi starter deck. All right, Kashtira. I gotta say, I think this is 1.5. Okay, so the Unicorn coming back to 3. Great consistency boost for this deck. There's a lot of combo variants. I've seen some adventure tokens. Just a lot of players might be playing cross out just to hit like maybe nib for overextending. Overall, this deck is just, I wouldn't say consistent, but it goes. Birth, I think Birth should have been hit on that ban list because Birth by itself is just a crazy card, and it does everything. He said, let's put everything in this one card. Kashtira Birth would be that card. Fenrir is just a good interruption. Being able to pluck a Fire King's extra deck if they only have one princess, because, you know, Sneak just came out. Not everyone's going to play 2 princess. So it's the same thing as Buzz King, where you can just rip a card if you're playing the horror stuff, you know. Overall, I think it's definitely 1.5. Maybe even better than Flu. Yeah, I'd put it better than Flu because it can break Flu boards. And then overall, play Shifter. Shifter is like, I remember playing Dino Rabbit back in the day. And when you flip macro, you lost. That's the equivalent of seeing Shifter. And so that's where I think it is. Great overall deck. But if you don't see Shifter, Droll's going to be running around. And I think Droll will just say, hey, that's a nice pressure planning you just activated. Oh, Goaty. Okay. I read the new support cards. I think you're better off. Bold take. This is bold. I know. A lot of fish players out there, but buy a Yugi starter deck. At least you'll have a change of heart in there. I'm pretty sure that came in there. If not, I lied to you. But I think this gets hard carried by Shifter. I don't think the synchros really do enough. Personally, I haven't tested it that much, so maybe it's tier 2. But I think you should just go buy Yugi starter decks, sleeve it up, and call it a day at your locals. There's no ifs, ands, or buts between it. Labyrinth. I'm a big Labyrinth guy. I love this deck, especially in cash format. I loved Eradicatoring for 5. I didn't want to play cash that format. It just wasn't my play style. Tier 2, and this is another bold take. The reason I put Labyrinth at tier 2 is because Ash is still going to be running around, and every side deck is going to be playing Bell. Bell hits Fire King. It's going to hit Lab. It hits Voiceless Voice, believe it or not. Bell hits Voiceless Voice. They discard for Saphira. You Bell that. It's like an extra copy of Ash. And belling a Saphira when they discard is huge going against them. Now you're putting them on what's in my hand. Can I get this out? And like I said, or like I'm going to talk about, we'll talk about Voiceless Voice and how it works here soon. But overall, Bell's going to be big. And I know Transaction Rollback is a card, but you have to draw the Transaction Rollback with the furniture. So it is somewhat of a 2-card combo. And even then, it doesn't feel good when you get belled and then you still use Transaction Rollback. It's really rough. It suffers the same thing as Branded back in the day. The deck's still good. It can Erad, it can D-Barrier. It has the new card, the Black Goat Laughs, I believe it's called now. I didn't keep up with that name. And that card on paper, it's good. You discard that with the furniture. But Transaction Rollback has that unfortunate thing of paying half your life points. And plus, it got a new Solemn Judgment. Now I'm thinking about maybe, we'll leave it tier 2. Because Thunder Roll, great card. Everybody's doubting that card, like, oh, why not just play Solemn and stuff? Well, here's the thing. You can play that card in an SP column. And SP can't respond, and you've just got rid of an SP while negging your opponent. Does it take a little bit of setup for them to continue and go? Yes, it does. But you just add an SP, and there's nothing they can do about that because it's spell speed 3. Anyways, on to the next deck. I think this deck got really good support. This is Magispector. I think very bottom of tier 2. What do I say? Kira needed to come back. It really needed to come back for this deck. I think this deck falls into Nib really easily now. I haven't really tested this one as much ever since I saw the last list. Kieran didn't come back. I was really hoping for it. I played this deck way back in the day, but even then, it still can put up a board. It still can put up the counter trap and the regular trap in the back row. It's still a pendulum deck. It's going to lose hard to, like, if it queues into a Kashtira board. Cosmics are going to be running around, so Cosmic, the Pendulum, and the Pendulum Zone. It just has that common L as a pendulum deck, so it's very rough. Next we have Orcust. Oh shoot, I lost Orcust at the last regional I played. I played Philly, got to round 5, and lost to Orcust, and I just didn't think I'd have to respect this deck again, but I think it's a solid, no, yeah, 1.5. This deck can definitely go off. Field Spell's insane for this. Makes everything quick effect. The one dude I think is untargetable or something like that. Or no, he's a non-targeting removal. And there's not going to be as many Bestials, but Soul Release can kind of like get at this deck a little bit. It's wellly timed. It's been falling into nibs, I believe, lately, because they're just comboing off and special summoning monsters left and right. I think this one is going to be a true challenge coming for the next format. There's going to be some shifters running around, so that could also impact this deck a lot. There's that. Pearly. I'm a big Pearly guy. Love summoning these wonderful cats that are unaffected. Love Pearly. Oh, man. Why? Why are goblins a deck? It's like Konami came out and said, hey, goblins are here to make sure no one plays this deck anymore. Why? Okay. I'd put it, if you're playing purely, you should probably go buy a Yu-Gi-Oh! Starter deck. But I will say this. If you are playing anti-droll, anti-meta, Pearly, I think you're right here, tier 2 above Magic Spectre. The reason being, you go first, you activate a D-Fisher. They can't droll you. You activate your street, get to your street, and you play off. That's amazing. That's good. It can play Shifter. That's not ideal, but it can do it. And it can play a whole bunch of non-engine. But this deck suffers from a lot of hand traps getting thrown at it. If you don't see something out the droll, or if they set up a board to the point where it's like, well, this is going to suck. It just, how the mighty have fallen. We'll put it that way. But overall, I put it in tier 2. I think a lot of people, from what I've seen, are putting Pearly a lot higher. But like I said, we're going to have these wonderful people who I know shower and use deodorant every day playing goblins, just to be like, I hope I get paired against a Pearly player, because the Goblins guys, one dude, he's a quick effect. So you go to leap and you just detach 2 from the little guy already, and you're sitting on a war with only 1 spin. And it's kind of sad. Oh, the mighty have fallen. Anyways, on to the next deck. Man and Dome. So let's move this to 1.5. Right, I'd say above Orcust. It's so great combo deck. Drolls can be running around, but you can play around it. You can play the crossouts. You can play the called buys. I think that's really where you want to go, especially in a hand trap heavy format with that deck. But this deck has that weakness, and it has a weakness to overall just throw many hand traps at it. You know, hand trap them 3 times, they just kind of pass sometimes. And Super Poly. I think Super Poly will be running around. I think mostly in the Voiceless Voice deck, either main or side. But overall, it's a good option to start off the format. I think later down the format, this kind of does like drop down to tier 2, because people will just be a little bit more prepared in the side for it. But it still has that like, hey, listen, I'm still here. I'm still a deck. I'm here to play. I'm a lore deck. I have like 4 different planets I can play in my deck, but you only play like 2 or 3. And yeah, I mean, overall, it's a great combo deck. You go first, you win the die roll, you're doing amazing. Going second's kind of rough, and I think that just falls under like, hey, combo decks in general just don't like going second. But if you win the die roll every time, hey, it is what it is. Wee woos, okay. Let's go to the wee woos. We'll put the wee woos definitely 1.5. I think right here at 1.5. I think you're getting Princess. You took the hit to Airlifter last set, and that really, really, really hurts. But getting Princess allows you to resolve your Turbulence a lot more safer, a lot more consistent. You end on a better end board, and outing cards that say like target and negate or target and destroy, and then whatever hand traps you draw, it's still really good. Setting 4 cards, that is practically a +4 depending on if you go in an uninterrupted or not. What I will say is I feel like there is going to be a lot of Evenlies inside, and I think Evenly just kind of like clears out that board. This deck doesn't really put up any Omni negates. You can put it in your side for this deck, but that's an on you thing. It depends on what you want to win against and what you want to lose against. It does have some non-engine in there, and overall it's just a good like. I feel like this deck is a glass cannon. It's like every time you play against it, it's like, okay, like I know where to interrupt. You try to interrupt, and they just played around it. But if you put this in your hands, or maybe this is just me, when I put this deck in my hands and try a couple test hands, it's like, oh, all I have to do is stop me here, but they don't know that. So I feel like it's a very glass cannon. I put it above everything else up here in the 1.5, but it is what it is. Like I said, +4, you know, you definitely are using deodorant if you're using this deck right here. So let's go on to the next one. Runic. You got like Runic Vistriol, Runic Stun. I think anything Runic still going to be like around tier 2. Put it right above Pearly here. The good thing about Runic is when you go first is you have that knowledge. You have that. I activate tip. Oh, I revealed a Welcome Labyrinth. Cool. I already got my search. Deltas. Don't ban. If you were playing against Runic, don't banish your cards until they add off tip. I've seen so many players misplay, and the other person's like, oh, I'm just going to add something else now. And I'm like, oh, man. But overall, it gives you knowledge. It gives you how to play into something. There's Bestial. There's Runic Fur Hire. I think it's going to be decent. I think it's just going to lose to, shifter decks. Bell's going to be running around. Ash is going to be running around. Lancia is going to be running around. And I think it just takes that hit to, hey, we're in a hand trap heavy format. This is going to be rough playing Runic. But overall, if you can win the die roll, hey, who am I to say what tier 1 is and buying a Yugi starter deck is? Let's talk about Goat in the room. Voiceless Voice. Definitely want to put this... Okay, I'm taking a bold take. I'm going to say a lot of different things here. I think this deck's tier 1. Reason I think this deck's tier 1. It puts up an Omni Negate. You can play Dynamondo, I think is called the Link monster, that summons on your opponent's turn. And you can't target it. You can't target these guys. They have a 4,100 beat stick that you have to swing over, because I don't think you can swing in anything else. And it's very, resource heavy. It can play hand traps. It can play board breakers. It just plays around the meta. It can make Chaos Angel in this deck. I've been playtesting this deck immensely. What does it lose to? A well-timed roll. A Bell on the Saphira. Just a Lancia can kind of screw this deck up. It's not stopping the Saphira from banishing. Or the Prosperity from banishing. Or the Extra from banishing. Depending on which one you're playing. It loses to kind of those cards. It loses to Flu because, well, their main guy has to be an attack. I don't think has to be. I'd have to reread that now. But overall, I think this deck is going to be good. I think a lot of players are on this deck. I think moving forward, I think it's going to lose to Attention. I think that's the best way of putting it. I think labs are going to throw in their Erads. I think a lot of decks are going to be playing Anti-Spell Fragrance on the side also. And I think that is just gonna this deck kind of scoops up unless you see a Cosmic. Now, this deck going against Fire King, I think it's kind of a die roll thing. Overall, I think this deck is definitely tier 1. I think it's gonna be the bottom tier 1. We have one more deck we're gonna talk about. But you have to be clean. I'm not talking I just got out the shower clean. I'm talking you went home, you realized I need to change my personality and stuff. So you shaved your head bald, Mr. Clean. Not Fabuloso, Mr. Clean. Mr. Clean, as in, you put on that white t-shirt, hey, I'm the new spokesperson. Dyed your eyebrows. You went for it. You went for it. You have to be clean on this deck. There is no in-between. You have to know your interactions. You just can't sit there and no Vox, Skull Guardian all day. You have to be clean on it. You got to know when to do it. And if you are a good Voiceless Voice player, then you're going to have a great day. Because a lot of people don't know what these cards do. A lot of people are sleeping on this deck. A lot of people have been focusing for this deck. I think this deck is going to be up here for a while. And then I think it gets more support in Legacy, but we'll talk about that at a different time. So, big fan of this deck. A lot of people are putting this down here, but definitely has to go up there. Like I said, you can't target it, so has a great Rescue Ace matchup. Branded has a good matchup against this, though. So, I'm liking the way this format's going so far. Rika, so this took a little bit of a hit to the ban list with Dryas and Healer. Another bold take, I think you should just buy a Yugi Star deck. I think Droll is going to make you lose. I think you're better off just tribute summoning into Dark Magician and having a better time there. And they are getting some support cards, don't get me wrong. Maybe I am just sleeping on this deck. But it's not what it was going to be, and I'm a big advocate of well, I was going to play it this way, but something stopped me from doing that, and it's just not the same, because you're just not going to feel good about yourself. If you don't feel good about yourself, you can't be Mr. Clean and play up here. You're going to be stuck down here buying the Yugi starter deck. That's the worst one out of all the original 4 that came out. Be Mr. Clean. Snake Eyes, pure Snake Eyes. Whew. Wow. Here. We're going to put it right here. I think Snake Eyes I've tested quite a bit. It's around 16 to 18 flex spots. It plays a whole bunch of hand traps. On average, you're seeing like 3 to 4 hand traps and maybe a starter. Kind of like when Centurion first started off. A lot of hand traps and a couple starters. This deck just plays heavy into a nib. It can play heavy into a droll, don't get me wrong. But if you go first and you get played into those cards, you're sitting on 3 or 4 hand traps yourself. It's like your turn's coming back to you, and it's practically a top deck game at that point. Now, that's why I think it's better than Voiceless Voice. That's why I think it's better than a lot of these, because it can just play a whole bunch of non-engine that can hurt a lot of decks. Now, when it comes to Fire King versus Pure Snake Eyes, on paper, this is better. When I've been testing, this seems a little bit better than this, but this has that extra gas behind it that can keep playing. So maybe this is just a toss-up here, but for now, I'm just going to go with the Fire King variant. But, you know, we'll keep that one popping, Slime. We'll keep that one locked in, ready to go. So that's where I'd put that. I think this is solid so far. Sprite. They did get support with EMP. Yeah, tier 2. Tier 2. It's very good. Going first, you can pair it with well, you can play Pearly with it. It's decent. A lot of decks have been topping like that recently, but it's suffering. There's a lot of hand traps. It can play through hand traps. It can play some non-engine. It can play board breakers. A lot of versatility. EMP is decent in this deck. It's a great utility card. But I would definitely consider things here or there. I think that's a good place to put it. And I put it below Goblins because Goblins will just look at a Gigantic and have free reign. So over that deck. And then overall, it is a good deck. A little outdated, but good. If they brought Elf back, this would go right here to Mr. Clean. I should just change it to Mr. Clean. But anyways, on to next deck. We have tier. Actually, I'm going to put this. We're going to put this right there. I think it's still a decent deck. I think getting rid of the shufflers was good. People can still play Horus and still do good and get some good mills. Going to Zombie Vampire. I still think this deck is very viable, but I feel like a lot of shifter decks are running around. There are some drolls, so like you could play Mseti, then get drolled after that, and then need to add something like Off Your Planet or something like Shirin. So overall, I like it as a deck. I think it's finally time that it's seen, in a sense, death from the ban list of multiple hits. Overall, yeah, I think that's a good placement for tier. I don't see, you might see 1 or 2 running around in like top cuts and stuff, but outside that, people are playing shifters, bells, drolls kind of hurt. Vanquish Soul, fighting deck. I wish this deck would fight its way down so I could buy it with my wonderful wallet. I'd have to put it right. I put it 1.5. Right, I put it above Flu here. Reason being, it can main Bell, which will kind of say no to the Fire King stuff, to the Voiceless Voice stuff, to Labyrinth, but it has some consistency issues. It also plays Shifter. It's just kind of that mid-range grind deck. It's like, I have a lot of monsters. I'm just going to try and grind these monsters out and just keep going. If you throw, I'd say the best way to play against this deck is if you throw a lot if they're trying to play and you just throw a lot at them and just stun them and go card for card with them. If your deck can do that, you're going to do good. That's why Fire King goes first. It goes card for card, and it just kind of overpowers us. But the non-engine that this can run and continue with is amazing. So I think it's going to see some success in that aspect. But outside that, I think it's a 1.5. Right about there. Maybe 2, knocking down a peg, but it can run some pretty good non-engine. Unchained. I think this deck. I think Nibs are going to be running around bells. Same thing. Shifters. So you really need your graveyard. Yeah, just buy a Yu-Gi-Oh starter deck, in my honest opinion. It can play, don't get me wrong, but it's not what it used to be. You can still Ash Tour Guide. I still think that's the correct Ash to this day. But overall, yeah, just buy a Yu-Gi-Oh starter deck. I think you're better off unless maybe I'm just coping. Maybe I just never liked this deck because they're just kind of unfair last format. But just buy a Yu-Gi-Oh starter deck. Don't be the guy that never lets a deck die. Don't be the branded. I'm kidding. Let's go on to Yubel. Yubel. Yeah, another Yu-Gi-Oh deck. The fusion's really good. It is a super poly target. Until this deck gets way more support, I don't want to hear it. I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh boomer, so I played when the original Phantom Darkness came out back in the day, and I was like, oh, Yubel, and then no one played the cards because they were bad, and I still think Konami was like, well, let's bring back some nostalgia, but like still like keep these guys under wraps. But maybe I'm coping a little bit. Who knows? If this deck ever became tier 1, my wallet's empty. I love this deck. This is probably one of my more favorite sets to come out since probably like Duelist Alliance or Tactical Evolution. That's how old I am. But overall, let's get on buy, sell, trade. Buy a Yu-Gi-Oh starter deck together and sing Kumbaya, my lord. Because you're not going to be winning many matches with this deck. But that's all I got for you. Please like and subscribe. Do the right thing in life. And I'll see you next time here on Bean of Games.